So, within the last week, I've seen a very interesting topic. So I'm gonna try to do my best to divvy up my time between elaborating more on the 8-minute video that I posted the day after I posted episode 7 last week, and then about the topic that I saw over the course of the last week. So I'm gonna start with that one, but I'm gonna start with the latter first because I feel like that's a little bit important versus the second part, also because it'll kind of help segue into the second part, and it'll kind of help boost more of me explaining my short video that I posted after episode 7. So, welcome to Divergence and Divine. My name is WIllspiration, and today we're going to be talking about two topics. The first topic is going to be about essentially autism as a disability and whether you choose to identify as being disabled or not, and clarifying that whole ordeal. And then going off of that, how autism affects everyone differently, and just kind of helping you guys feel more positive about yourselves, because I know that there's a lot of people that feel like autism is like a prison, and it is, but I can just say that, like, for me personally, I was in that mindset before too, and it is possible to like get out of that mindset. It's not like you're always going to have the mindset, it's just the thoughts won't be persistent. So I'll go over that more in detail. So let's start off with the first topic. So, autism as a disability and choosing to whether you want to identify as disabled or not. This is a very interesting topic, and one that I had to research ahead of time because I saw this on Quora.com about how people are asking, like, if they should identify as disabled. The one that really got me was when a father was asking how he should handle telling his level 1 autistic son that he's disabled because his son doesn't personally identify as being disabled. And I'm like, that is an interesting topic. I'm like, I might have to cover that. But I think for a lot of people, it varies because we have to remember that autism is a spectrum, right? So there's also this thing where a lot of people are like, it's a disorder. It's it's just a simple, difference in wiring in the brain. So it's not like a true disorder or a true disability. There are people that are like, well, according to government laws, it is a disability. And I feel like it's just very muddled and very, very confusing. Especially if you're trying to learn more about autism. So I kind of want to give my own take on it. And maybe this will help you guys like understand the more nuanced way that it's approached. So autism as a disability is, yes, it is a disability for a vast majority of autistic people. Obviously when you think of it being as like seeing it as a disability, you think of like level 2 and level 3 autistic people, more profound levels of autism where they actually need the support. So obviously that's a given. That is a true disability. The more gray area where a lot of this like confusion is stemming from is from the fact that level 1 autistic people, essentially, because we can mask our symptoms, we kind of are in that weird state of, a good majority of level 1 autistic people feel disabled by their autism, just like, somebody that's got more profound levels of autism would feel, heightened sensory issues and texture issues and things like that. I know that one of the many autistic accounts that I follow on social medias, one woman said that for her, one of the more disabling aspects of autism is bathing. Like she hates taking, a shower. She hates bathing because she doesn't like being wet. Like she does not like water on, like, like touching her skin like that. She can drink water and she doesn't mind it, but when it comes to like being like covered in water, she just can't. Like it's too much for her sensory wise. Like it just overloads her and overwhelms her. So she's got to struggle and force herself to take a shower. And, for a lot of people that is disabling. It's like, sometimes you touch something, and if you have to touch something and you don't like how it feels, that amount of overwhelmingness can literally cause like a shutdown or cause you to have a meltdown. And it is very, disabling, and it's very hard to push through it. But the main problem that a lot of people don't realize too is that with level 1 autism, there is a level of, you know, where, yeah, you can have autism and it's a spectrum where, maybe you have sensory issues, but they're not as intense as like somebody else's. You know, I guess an example for me is like, I don't like, thick, gooey, slimy stuff. So, like, for example, like egg whites. If I get egg whites on my hand when I crack an egg, it feels gross, right? Like it's gross. I don't like it, but it's not to the point where I'm like freaking out about it and I have a meltdown because I can't stand the texture of it. It's like I hate the texture of it, but I can also just kind of just sit there and be like, ew, and then just kind of keep going about my day. And then when I get it, like while I'm cooking, and then when I get a chance to wash my hands, then I wash my hands and I wash it off. But it's not like to the point where I dread making eggs from time to time because I want an egg and I don't want to crack an egg because I don't want to get egg whites on my hand. So it's not like, it's not disabling like, like the person that I mentioned earlier that can't bathe because they don't like being wet, like they hate water on their skin. When it comes to textures and sense of touch like that, mine isn't as bad. Like I can take it. It's annoying and I'd rather just take care of it right away. But if I'm like super busy, like trying to get other things, in terms of cooking done, it doesn't really bother me unless like it involves like preparing fresh food and like, and then in which case I would actually wash my hands, obviously, because just to make sure that like there aren't any germs spreading or anything like that. Um, Especially I know that like there's been quite a few recalls on eggs recently because of salmonella. So it's always a good idea that even if eggs haven't been recalled, that like even after you crack them, you still wash your hands and wash your spatula and your pan after use anyway. That way you're not letting it, you're not taking that chance, right? Um, but like if I'm just making a simple egg, like it's not really a big deal. I'll still cook the egg, and then I'll just, when I'm done making the egg, I put it on a plate, and then that's when I, you know, will wash my hands, and then I'll eat, and then once the pan has cooled off, then I take the spatula and the pan, and I, obviously put it in the sink and I wash it. But the point is that it's not, for me, that's not debilitating. It's just an annoyance. Like if I were to put it on a scale of 1 to 5, I'd give it like a 2. It's annoying. It bothers me, but it's also not bothersome enough that I can't just keep going about my business, right? But for that person that can't, that hates to bathe because they hate the feeling of water on their skin and they hate being wet, for them, that's like a 4 or like 4 or even like a 5 out of 5. Like it is like horrible. They don't want to do it and it's extremely debilitating. And if you were to try to force them into a shower, they would just sit there and have a meltdown because it's that bad. And mind you, this person is also a level 1 autistic, and they have that same reaction that a level 2 or a level 3 autistic person would have if they had that same sensory issue. So that's kind of why for like level 1 autistics, it's like it's a very, very like just kind of, there's a lot of gray area. It's very muddled. That's why a lot of like autistic people will be like, they see it as a disability, but then there is also like that small portion that are like, I don't personally feel disabled. It's like everything to them is like on a scale of 1 to 5 is like, you know, somewhere between like 1.5 to like 3.5. Somewhere where it's like meltdowns are extremely rare, and otherwise a lot of, their sensory issues and a lot of the way that autism affects them is, it's very annoying, a little challenging, but not to the point where, they feel disabled by it. And then that leads to the whole issue of then like other people in the autism community accusing those people of, oh, well, because you personally don't identify as disabled, you're standing with the people that say autism isn't a disability. But that's the thing, is that you can't just go around and shove words into people's mouths like that, because those people also don't understand that you can have autism and personally identify as a not disabled. And then there are people that have autism that literally are disabled because they will have a meltdown over something because it's so overwhelming to them. That is a disability. They cannot function when they do that thing. So it's a very fine line, and it's a very like nuance, and like you got to really know more details about it. But I just want to go on record to say that to kind of just clarify this simply, that for a vast majority of level 1 autistics, yes, autism is just as debilitating as it is for level 2 and 3 autistics. The only difference is that they can actually, they're verbal, and they don't, they can pass for neurotypical due to masking their symptoms. But for a small majority of autistic people, they personally don't identify as disabled because while they do meet the criteria to be autistic, a lot of their symptoms don't really range to that point of having meltdowns and, not being able to kind of just essentially push through stuff to get it done, no matter how uncomfortable they may feel doing it. So for them, it's like, it's annoying, it's uncomfortable, I don't like doing it, but I can do it, right? It's possible. And especially if you, like for like me, for example, it's like, I don't really qualify for help because of the fact that I can do that. So it's just like, they'll look at me and be like, well, you don't really need assistance. And if you need like financial assistance, that's no different than a neurotypical needing financial assistance. So we can't really help you with that, right? It's like, basically, I'm not really essentially disabled because of that. But then another level 1 autistic can go and ask, for assistance with something and get it because of the fact that they have meltdowns and that it's, debilitating. So the important thing is to remember that it is a disability, hence why it's federally a disability. And I believe in all 50 states on a state level, it's also a disability. So yes, it is a disability. For the people that don't personally identify as disabled or don't feel disabled by their autism, it's more of like a disorder. So it's kind of more like the same way that like, some people view ADHD as a disorder, right? So it's just like, it's not very debilitating. It's just very, very annoying and makes life a little challenging, but not to the point where you would be like, require actual assistance, because you can actually force yourself to push through things even though you don't want to. But because you have that ability, you kind of aren't seen as disabled. And it does kind of suck. But at the end of the day, I think the best way to close off this segment for this topic is I'm just going to try to make this like a really quick bullet point list. But bullet point list: autism is a disability to a vast majority of level 1 autistics and to all level 2 and 3 autistic people. And a small portion of the level 1 autistic community, such as myself, personally do not identify as disabled because while we are on the spectrum, a lot of how autism affects us isn't essentially debilitating enough. And as a result, we don't really technically qualify for assistance because of the fact that it doesn't feel as debilitating. So, autism is a disability, but not everybody feels personally disabled by it, if that makes sense. Um, I hope that kind of clears up a little bit of that confusion. The next thing that I want to talk about more is essentially how a lot of people on the spectrum don't love themselves, I guess. At least that's what it seems like to me. Like, I see a lot of the stuff on Reddit and a lot of posts on social media, and it just seems that like a lot of level 1 autistic people just don't really love themselves. Now, I could be wrong, and it just literally could be them venting, like that they're just having a bad day and they just need to vent about how they hate being autistic in that specific moment. But for me, I know that there are definitely plenty of people out there that really do genuinely hate being autistic and they would rather just not exist at all, which is why the unaliving rate from a video that I saw is that like people that are autistic, I'm guessing that this statistic specifically refers to level 1 autistic people, are, I believe it's 5 or 8 times, one of those two. It's either 5 times or 8 times more likely to end themselves, to put it mildly, because of the fact that, a lot of it is they hate being autistic. They hate the I guess they just, I'm trying to figure out how to word it, but it's just like they don't really, it's so hard. It's so hard to explain it because it's just kind of like I understand their point of view because I felt like that, especially in my teenage years. I felt like that where like, because mind you, I am a late diagnosed person. I got diagnosed when I was 27 and I'm 32. But when I was in my teenage years, I felt the same way. I felt like I didn't belong. I hated being different. I felt like I had zero purpose in life. I felt like I was just a waste of space and that the world would be better off without me. And, you know, as soon as I got my autism diagnosis, that pretty much went away. And I feel like for people that are diagnosed younger, they have to, when you're little, you kind of learn to accept it. And then you start getting older and you get into your teenage years where, teenagers are a little more, do whatever the they want. And, some people are little shits when they're in their teenage years and really, annoying. And bullies. Oh, don't even get me started on bullies. But then those teenagers, if any of them make it through high school before, attempting, then at some point, I guess the median age after conducting, an investigation on this is like the median age at some point, what was it? I think it was like between like 18 and 30. I believe like within that range, like at some point between the ages of like 18 and 30, autistic people that are level 1 are more likely to end themselves than, neurotypical people are. Which is why when you see this statistic that like the average life expectancy of autistic people that are level 1 is like roughly 40 years old, is because there are that many level 1 autistic people that end themselves that it's actually skewed the numbers that badly. Like there's a lot of level 1 autistic people that just really genuinely hate the autistic experience and would rather be free of it than to live out a life. Because aside from like some like health issues like autoimmune issues or like, intestinal or gut health issues, none of which are, at least for the gut health, aren't really life threatening. The autoimmune disorders obviously can be more life threatening if not properly treated. from, as early as possible. But it's just, we live normal, healthy lives, but a lot of people just, between the bullying and feeling ostracized and, feeling, especially the level one autistics that do have a lot of, like parts of the spectrum where it makes them feel very disabled. They just hate the experience and they would rather just not exist and be free of it rather than just, learning to see the light in the dark and the dark in the light. And it's very sad. And I want to really focus on targeting level one autistic people that are like, that get the, oh, you don't look autistic. Oh, you can't be autistic. You don't act like my autistic, grandson or son or niece or nephew or cousin, etc. Like, which a lot of those, people typically are level 2 or 3, which, blame social media and the film industry for that, because, and mainstream media too, because they only ever talk primarily about level 2 and 3. So a lot of neurotypicals, they don't understand that level 1 autism is a real thing. And that just kind of really just adds insult to injury, because now you're just like, damn, I am a level 1 autistic. Like, I am autistic and I'm being told that I'm not. And that's not fair to me. So my thing, I think, that I want to share is trying to look at it more in a positive light. I'm not in like the camp of like autism as a superpower. Like, I feel like that's very detrimental, because I feel like people often say that about level 1 autistics, because it's like, if you are like me and you don't like personally feel disabled by it, because a lot of your like the symptoms that you have are like on a scale of 1 to 5 are like primarily 2, 3, maybe 3.5 out of 5 at most. People would look at you and be like, "Oh, then you're like one of the, like, autism's a superpower for you," and it's like, no, that's not how that works, and that's not really how that works in general. It's just your brain is wired differently, so you have a more logical way of thinking, including like an all or nothing thinking pattern, which is like referred to as black and white thinking. But that doesn't make it a superpower. That just means that you're just more logical than a neurotypical person. You have more common sense. So like, they'll be like, use common sense. And you're like, I am using common sense. And they're like, no, you're not. Because their common sense is based on, I guess it just kind of seems more like what they're told. Whereas, like, if you look at something logically and you look at common sense and you go, for something that's common sense, this doesn't seem very sensible at all. And, I guess that's kind of why it's like, oh, it's a superpower, but it's not. So let's not call it a superpower. That's kind of hurtful to that, the way things are, in terms of this already whole issue with it having the debacle of, is it a disorder? Is it a disability? Is it neither? And it's just a difference in the wiring of the brain and all this other stuff that I talked about earlier at the beginning of the show. But the problem is the fact that I feel like when you do have a lot of, like, when you do have symptoms of autism that feel more debilitating, like low, like, a 4 out of 5 or a 5 out of 5, it is very, very hard to not love yourself in those moments, because you don't want to experience that anymore. You don't want to live because of that. And that's, and first of all, I mean, it's a very valid reason. Like, it is debilitating and it's crippling, and, it's got to be excruciating, I'm sure. But the problem is that, like, you have so much to live for. Like, there are so many things that you could achieve, you know, within the realm of what you are able to do, despite the fact that you have some symptoms that are debilitating of autism and being level 1 and still not being seen as autistic by neurotypicals, right? You have the potential to do something, amazing. You have the ability to be amazing. You have the ability to be wonderful and, bring joy to others. And I know that some people might be like, yeah, joy to others by getting picked on and bullied. But the thing is that as you get older, people start to mature. So neurotypicals typically, most of the time, by like mid 20s, are very mature. They'll look back at life and be like, wow, I was a little shit when I was a teenager, and I probably shouldn't have treated that person like that. Because at some point they grow out of it. Not every neurotypical person grows out of it. Some neurotypicals are, jerks and bullies the rest of their lives, and they never outgrow it, and it's pretty sad. Um, but a majority of neurotypicals typically grow out of it. So if a neurotypical laughs at you, like, it could just be that you're perceiving that they're laughing at you. But even if they are laughing at you, part of maturing and part of loving yourself is having humility. So if they're laughing at you, laugh at yourself too, you know? Instead of being like, man, if this didn't happen because I was, autistic, then like no one would be laughing at me. They'd be like, "Oh, are you okay?" So instead of seeing it as like, if I wasn't autistic, things would be different. Just be like, you know what? It was pretty funny. Like there's times where like, I'll be walking and then like for whatever reason, like my foot decides it doesn't want to bend and then it just like I trip, right? Like my foot drags on the floor and like I almost trip myself. And before it was always very embarrassing and I would just kind of be like embarrassed. Now every time it happens to me, I just laugh. I let out a little chuckle and I'm just like, you know, make a dumb little joke to myself and just keep walking because it's like at the end of the day, I don't care if people look at me and think that, wow, he's a klutz. I really don't care because that is just part of me being autistic. That is part of me just being human. Like, because at the end of the day, neurodivergent or neurotypical, we're all still humans. The only difference is that, we level one autistics face a lot of challenges, and the biggest challenge is the fact that we are often not seen as autistic because of the fact that we can mask pretty damn well. And I think it's more so that we just got to learn to love ourselves better because one thing that's really helped me is having gratitude for everything. And that includes having gratitude for all the negative things that have happened in my life. Because sometimes the best things come after a storm. And again, like I was saying earlier, there's light and darkness, and there's darkness and light. Like light and dark are two sides of the same. I was gonna say token, coin, either or, however you want to look at it. But they're two halves of a whole. Like you can't have one or the other. Like that's just the law of the universe is that there's light, there's dark, there's good, there's bad. And you can't just always want to be, one or the other because just like how a lot of people see being, negative all the time as a toxic trait, being positive all the time and choosing to ignore the negative is also very toxic. So you got to learn to have gratitude for both things. Is it hard to have gratitude for negative experiences? Absolutely. It is very hard. There's a lot of resistance that you'll feel when you first start doing that. Like, why should I be grateful for being picked on? Why should I be grateful for tripping and almost cracking my face open because my, foot dragged on the floor when I was walking? Why should I be grateful that I missed out on a job opportunity because of my autism? You know what I mean? It's so much easier to focus on the negatives than the positives just because, like, you never know. Like, maybe you missed out on that job opportunity because you're autistic for a reason. Maybe it was because, God or the universe or whatever you believe in. If you don't believe in anything, like you're an atheist, and just, obviously something wasn't just, it was, regardless of what you believe in, it was just not meant to be. It was just not meant to be. And it's just much easier to be like, oh, well, if I wasn't autistic, this wouldn't have happened. Whereas, like, it could just be literally that something better is coming around the corner. Like, there's so many things like that you could be grateful for. And showing gratitude every day has really helped me a lot, especially with the fact that once I finally got used to it, it got to the point where now it's just like, I'm grateful for being autistic. Like, I don't hate it at all. I love being autistic. I love being ADHD. I love the fact that at work, when I mask, it's not masking myself to be accepted. It's masking because I need to be quote unquote professional at work while also actually still being able to do things like stimming and being able to just be myself within the policies and procedures and employee handbook and stuff like that. Because, some things can be seen as harassment, some things can be seen as, concerning behavior. Hence why professionalism is a thing. Those rules are put in place so that everyone feels safe and welcomed at work, even though obviously, work drama exists and, people, like I said earlier, never really grow out of the bully phase and just remain jerks their whole lives. You're still going to have those people even at some workplaces. But a lot of those rules are placed specifically so that a lot of people feel comfortable in the workplace. And if someone is making you feel uncomfortable in the workplace, then talk to someone in a position of power, like a supervisor or a manager or a team lead or a plant manager, and you just let them know what's happening. And then ultimately, once you go through the chain of command, if they can't do anything, then you go to HR. And if it's something that's very serious, you just go immediately to straight to HR. You just tell your supervisor, hey, this person's doing this. I'm going to go straight to HR because I don't feel comfortable, like with what's going on, and this needs to get taken care of immediately. And then typically, they'll take it from there. But, being able to just mask, not having a mask because I need a mask to be accepted, but just masking because of professionalism rules at the workplace is way better. And it's funny because, like, the other thing too is, like I was saying earlier, is having humility for yourself, being able to laugh at yourself when other people are laughing at you. I mean, that's kind of part of what comedy is too, is like being able to laugh at yourself on top of being able to laugh with yourself when other people are laughing at you and laughing with you. It doesn't really matter. As long as people are laughing, that's the whole point of comedy, right? So when you kind of really learn to start being more humble and learning to laugh at yourself, whether it's with yourself or at yourself when other people are doing the same, all of a sudden, then it doesn't matter what people think of you anymore because you're on the same page as them. And if they see that making fun of you isn't doing anything because of the fact that you're laughing at yourself with them, then you're no longer an easy target. They're just like, well, that's not funny. Why is he laughing with us? Like, he should be laughing at himself because we're laughing at him. And then they go, if we're laughing at him and he's laughing at himself, then what's the point of picking on him or picking on her or picking on them, depending on your pronouns? Because ultimately, they're not getting the satisfaction that they want out of it. And I feel like too many people just cut their lives short because they just don't see the light, or the light is just too far away for them to reach, and they just give up rather than, continuing to push. And sometimes you just don't have that hand to reach out and grab you and tell you that it's going to be okay and help guide you towards that brighter tomorrow, and, be able to live and experience life and, be hope for other people. And for me, what I want to do is I want everybody that listens to this to feel like they have somewhere to go, that with somebody that understands them and, is going to let them know that everything is okay. Everything will be okay. Everything will work out in the end, because it does. I truly believe it does. I'm 32, and yeah, I would have loved if this would have happened a lot sooner, like, 10 years ago when I was in my 20s. But you know what? At the end of the day, I stuck it out. And yeah, sure, I had to wait until my 30s for things to finally get better. But you know what? I am so glad that I chose to push forward and keep going. And that's the other thing that I want to touch on just briefly for a minute or two before I end the show is you have to adapt that mindset, and you have to adapt that wanting to change, because it's like therapy. With therapy, a lot of people give up on therapy because they don't feel like it's helping because they're not putting in the work. Therapy is a two-way street. Like, you're there to get help, and you are there to get the advice that therapists are giving you to work on. And then ultimately, wanting to improve, not just to feel better, but ultimately to be better. And you just got to want to be a better person and be the best version of yourself. And that involves growing every single day, and not just being like, oh, well, I don't feel as depressed anymore. I don't really need therapy anymore. I'm not really going to put in, any more work because I'm where I'm at. Because at some point, something is going to happen, and then you're going to fall right back into your old rut and your old ways again. And then you're going to feel like it didn't work. So you have to want to be the best version of yourself, because we are constantly growing and evolving and changing every single day. And that means having to adapt and evolve and change and grow every single day. And again, I know, adapting is hard when you're autistic and you like having a routine and everything. So trying to be the best version of yourself is a very, very daunting task. But if you can manage to find your own way to do it, it becomes a lot easier. And then you practice gratitude, you practice humility, you practice forgiveness, and you just, all of a sudden, you just feel a lot better about yourself. And then you feel like you can do so much more. And all of a sudden, it just opens up a realm of different possibilities. And yeah, you are going to have times where you're negative. And yes, there are going to be times where you have to, it might be hard. And there's nothing wrong with accepting the negative emotions that you feel, and, and acknowledging the negative experiences. But you can't let them weigh you down forever, because ultimately that's what leads to people giving up and ending themselves. And I just don't want to see so many good people just cut their lives short because they just feel like they couldn't amount to anything, or no one was ever going to come to save them, or no one understands them, or no one's going to show them the way. Like, I want to be the kind of person that helps everybody get there. And that's really what I want to aim to make this podcast about, is just to be there for the people that need somebody. So then that way they don't feel alone, because not everybody can push through that phase of feeling alone in the darkness and making it to the light on their own. Some people can, like myself, but most can't. And I don't want those people to give up and feel like nobody is there for them. But that's going to do it for today's episode. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. The notification bell will allow you to get notifications of when I upload a new episode of the podcast, or if I upload a short video covering a topic that I might want to, cover sooner rather than waiting until the podcast episode. Typically, like the one that I uploaded last week, it'll be a little more short form. It won't have too much details because I'll typically want to save it for the next episode of the podcast, so that way I can go in more detail about it. And yeah, I will see you guys on next week's episode of Divergence and Divine. Hope you guys all have a great week. So until next time, bye-bye.